Hi everyone, this is just a short video to get you started on Module 4, which is about your personal attributes and skills. So this follows on very closely from what we did in Module 3, where you were looking at your learning style. And as with Module 3, we get you to do some profiling, we do another quiz online. But what we ask you to do is to be thinking about, well, what does that mean for me as a learner? What does it mean in terms of my strengths and weaknesses, my natural preferences? And how can I make the most of who I am? How can we actually develop your potential to the fullest? So that's what it's all about. So there is a bit of self-reflection that's involved there. And in terms of, looking at your personal attributes and skills, we also tie that to the CQ University graduate attributes. So we look at what are the kinds of people we want you to be, the kinds of skills that we want you to have by the time you have completed not just steps but your degree, your undergraduate studies as well. So that's often very interesting for students, and it's actually quite affirming for them to realise that the sorts of things that we're looking for in our students are the sorts of things that you may already demonstrate. You may already, for example, have good personal skills, good teamwork skills. You may already have good IT skills or whatever it is. So basically, the crux of this is in terms of learning more about your personality type, is to do a quiz which is based on Myers-Briggs, and that in itself is loosely based on the work of a psychologist called Carl Jung, whom you may have heard of. He's very, very famous. And a lot of these personality profiles that we see in terms of quizzes, there's a Keyesy one, that's another one for example, are actually loosely based on the ideas of Carl Jung and the idea that there are certain archetypes, certain types of people, certain commonalities that you can see, even though of course everybody's different, but there are certain traits that you can pick up that are common with certain personalities, and that's what we're looking at. So let's just have a look at Moodle, because you will need to go to Moodle in order to access the quizzes. Of course, don't forget about your study guide, because there's some really good information here which actually isn't at Moodle. And when you do get your profile, your personality profile, there are some really handy descriptions of what all those attributes mean. So don't forget about your study guide. You will still need that as well. Now, for some inexplicable reason, the icons are not appearing today at Moodle, but that has happened in the past. It'll just be something that's temporary. Let's just go straight to the Jung typology test, which is there under useful links, and you'll see in a similar way to how you responded to the learning styles inventory that you're asked to nominate one or the other. So yes or no. You are almost never late for your appointments. Yes, no. And as with the other, there may be times when you find it a bit frustrating because you're thinking, well, it depends on what the appointment is. If it's a really important appointment, like going for a job interview, I'd be there on time. If it was to my hairdresser, an appointment with my hairdresser, and I know I usually wait, maybe I wouldn't be so thingy about it. So again, it can depend on context, and we do understand that, but just go with your initial reaction. Don't overthink it, just your first impression, and go with that. And when you have answered all those questions, there's quite a few of them, you'll be given a profile. Now that profile will consist obviously of descriptions, but there will be 4 key letters, and it's really important that you keep note of what those 4 letters are. So my profile, for example, is INFJ. So each of those letters stands for something. And you will see that there are descriptions online that you can look at, and as I said, there's also things in your study guide that will help you understand that. Now, it's really important for a couple of reasons. One is you have to be able to reflect on this for your learning portfolio questions for this particular module, and so you need to have that profile and you need to understand what those terms mean. The other reason it's important is that we actually refer to this again in week 5, in module 5, when you're looking at careers. So we use that information to help you work out potentially what kinds of careers might suit you. So please make sure that you really take note of what you find when you do that quiz. You don't want to have to do it again. So you will need to think about what each of those letters mean. You'll have to write about that in your learning portfolio for a start. And please don't assume that you know what they mean, because sometimes the meanings are a little bit different from our normal or more common use of those words. So for example, if you are if that's the first letter that comes out, introverted as opposed to extroverted, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are shy and awkward in social situations. It does mean that you prefer to recharge on your own, that you find if you're with too many people for too long, you actually start to feel a bit exhausted, whereas other people will be really energised by being around people. So that's one little tip there. Another is the word judging, which is a bit of a strange word, and sometimes people write, oh, I didn't realise I was judgmental. And when they say that, I realise that they haven't actually gone and read about what these terms mean, because in this sense, judging means that you're good at judging timeframes and workloads, and you're actually good at scheduling and getting the job done. So not judging as in judgmental. So make sure that you do read about those. There are some information that you can glean from the websites, so you can go to the various links that are associated with that profile once you get to the end of the quiz. And certainly another reading that I'd like to point out to you is this one here, which is a chapter from a book. So the link there is called Your Learning Personality, and that has some really good strategies for how you might apply that knowledge about your personality to a study context. And at the end of the day, that's what this is really about, is how you can optimise your strengths and weaknesses and your natural preferences as a learner. Now, the other thing to point out is that there is a team roles quiz there, and that is useful as well. It's optional, because we don't want people to feel that they're being bombarded, but it is good to do it in terms of there's a reflection that you're asked to do in your learning portfolio about what sort of role you would play in a team. And of course, we're not actually asking you to do anything in a group for assessment, but we know that everybody has been in a group, has worked on a team of one description or another at some point in their lives. So whether it was a sporting team or whether it was a community organisation, a committee, work teams, obviously at school you have to work in groups and on teams. So any situation that you can draw upon, we want you to reflect on what sort of a role you would play in a team at university. And also you can be thinking about your what you learned about yourself through that personality profiling, and also you can link that information when you are talking about your role on a team. So that all relates to what I was talking about before, which is the graduate attributes and skills, and that's important to sort of have that big picture perspective of where you're heading and the kinds of things that we think are important for university students to have. And as with the other modules, there is the discussion forum there. We'd love to hear your thoughts about what you learnt in that module. And also there's a reminder about the learning portfolio activity, and there's a link to the video which will give you some tips for writing that, because the good thing is by the time you've finished all of Module 4 and you have actually completed those summary questions in your learning portfolio, and if you've been keeping up week by week, then you've finished Learning Portfolio A, because it's based on Modules 1 to 4. So now's the time to go back and refine your answers and make sure that you have your overall word count that's pretty much working to that limit, and just that you have the best possible answers in the space that you have available. So lots of examples of what you're talking about. If, for example, you are talking about your learning profile, your personality profile from Module 4, and you want to disagree with aspects, that's fine. But in your reasons for disagreeing, it would be really important that you give us some concrete examples of what you mean and why this isn't a true reflection of who you are. So lots of specific examples, lots of explanation for what you mean, and that's one way of getting the kind of depth that we're looking for there. And of course there's the usual checklist for you, just so that you know that you're keeping up with everything. So look, all the best with Module 4. These are very simple tools. We know that these quizzes are not deep psychoanalytical or scientific tools in particular, but as simple as they are, they can really help students, help them understand themselves better. And actually it can help you understand other people better too, because you get a better sense of how other people might be seeing the world. So that's it from me, but all the best with Module 4 and good luck with Learning Portfolio A.